In a world where many people see reality as a circle or a rectangle, the truth is that issues are cylinders. Rather than a two-dimensional understanding, we will flush out the three-dimension complexities through nuanced conversation and civil, respectable discourse to highlight all perspectives on controversial issues. I'm your host, William Roosh, a high school teacher who's trying to transform education as we know it. Welcome to the Anti-Echo Chamber. This is Cylinder Radio. Hello and welcome to the next lesson of Cylinder Radio. Today, my guest is JR Becker. He is a children's book author for the Annabelle and Aiden series. And we're going to talk about big questions for little thinkers. This is like the subtitle of his book series. And JR was a philosophy major. He's a science-minded person. And taking that approach to children's books and addressing the biggest questions that we have in society, this is a really interesting conversation to get into because I have two small children. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing the best I can. I think a lot of parents try to do the best they can. And, how do we approach these big, complicated questions in the best way? I think that's a great conversation. So JR, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here.
So can you give us a little bit of your background? I know you studied philosophy and you had an interest in science. So why would I, want to choose you for this discussion on if the cylinder, the topic that we're going to talk about is addressing these really big, complicated questions with little kids who have developing minds. What makes you kind of an expert in this?
Okay, sure. To go back and talk about my background a bit, I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, in an Orthodox Jewish household. And I grew up Orthodox. I grew up in a religious household. My school taught me science and math and Judaic studies and secular studies. We were taught, when it came to, I guess I'll just jump right through it. When we were taught evolution and the Big Bang and all that stuff in science, we were taught it very quickly, very basically. It was paid lip service to. But, the rabbis would come in and say, if you have any questions about this, come to us. We have to teach this to you guys, learn it. We have to teach it to you. Here it is. And we would learn about it in the most remote way, the peppered moths in England and how the spots on their wings changed and this and that. Not at all how it relates to us. And I'm going off topic a little early here in the podcast, but no. I don't think that was only for dogmatic reasons. I think it was also just lack of interest. I don't think it even was a religious thing so much. I think a lot of secular schools, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners here know this better than I do, but I think it's just an unawareness of how evolution relates to us and how it's nothing in biology makes sense without it. I just think, that's part of the reason. But anyway, I got older and I'm skipping a lot of stuff here, but in college, I took a philosophy class, analytical philosophy, and my life changed. I didn't know what philosophy was. I didn't know that it existed. I mean, I knew that it existed, and I knew basically what it was, but it was like, wow, we're going to talk for an hour about what a valid argument is and what an invalid argument is and what a sound argument is and about premises and conclusion, and this is how to think, and this is how to speak, and this is how to argue, and this is how to know what's true and what's not true. This is incredible. I mean, I ate it up. I'm like, this is what I've always wanted and been missing. I loved it. And long story short, to relate it to your question, I shed a lot of the beliefs that I grew up with, and I had a profound hunger to find out what is true. Religion, from my religious upbringing, I wanted to get to the bottom of it. Really, it's 5 or 7 years after college, I heard a speech by a rabbi giving rational proofs for Judaism. And I loved his speech, not so much for the argument he gave, but more for the fact that I didn't really know that that conversation existed, or that other people were having it, or that I was allowed to have it, because I feel like it was burning inside of me my entire life since I was 3 years old, watching grown adults sway their bodies back and forth in synagogue as they pray to what they believe is the creator of the universe, that they should have a good year and do well on their job interview and whatever it is. I was like, wow, we could actually talk about this and discuss whether or not it's true and why we think it's true, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I was left with a large emptiness, like, what is true if it didn't happen like this? And I was like a kid in a candy store learning science and evolution and the Big Bang and about our ancestors and other human species. And I realized no one's talking about this. Every child in America knows row, row, row your boat, Jack and the Beanstalk, Bible stories.
Right.
Kids don't know this stuff. Adults don't know this stuff. If you walk down the street in any major city, I don't know what the statistics are, but I really suspect, and I actually did this in Vegas. I was in Vegas speaking at a humanist convention, and I put on a spacesuit and walked up and down the strip with a camera and a microphone. And I asked people if they knew what evolution was and filmed them. It's pretty funny. But no one knows. I mean, 1 out of 7 adults kind of know what evolution is and how it affects us, but most people think it's like a one-time event that happened thousands of years ago when maybe 20 monkeys turned into humans. And I mean, people don't know what it is. And it explains how every living thing looks and operates and acts and thinks, and why we have a sense of humor, and why we are attracted to people of sexually or romantically, our taste in food, our aesthetics, why we create stories and myths, why we like the food that we do. I mean, it explains absolutely everything biologically. And I was really excited about it, and I wrote books on it to share the news.
This is really shocking to me. And maybe I'm in my bubble. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I live in LA now, so we're coastal. Maybe that plays a role, but it is shocking to hear that from just your anecdotal, experience. And I'm sure there's data on this that you can look up.
Yeah.
About what people think about evolution, that people don't know what evolution is. It seems like it is just so just understood now and accepted. It's really fascinating. I would always kind of go in the other direction, from the Scopes trial in the 1920s, pushing this. But now, I know there was a case in like early 2000s in Dover, Pennsylvania, where someone was teaching some intelligent design. And now if you teach intelligent design in a public school, that you can get in trouble for that. And I guess I don't know why evolution and some sort of intelligent design, why are they always pinned against each other and made to be mutually exclusive? I don't understand that. I don't think that that's the way that it works. And I am not an expert in this, but why can't it be that evolution, we have evolved from single-celled organisms that came from the Big Bang, but that only goes so far? And why can't it be, Elon Musk and all these, super smart people think maybe we're in a simulation. Well, if we're just some, fat kid in a basement of his parents' house and we're on a computer program that he's doing, well, then he's God. I don't know.
Right.
I just don't understand why those are pinned against each other. Do you have thoughts on that?
I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I think about that too. And on the one hand, I agree with you, and on the other hand, I don't. I'm undecided. Obviously God, obviously there could be a God, and he could be behind evolution. Why not, right? But then I heard it said this way. I heard it said by my friend Dale McGowan. He said, evolution doesn't leave much for a God to do. The whole point of evolution is that it's blind and mechanistic, right? Genetic mutations are random. They're random, right? How do we know they're random? If you see if you flip a coin a million times and you look at heads and tails, you could tell if there's a pattern or if it's random. You could just tell. We all know what the word random means. So I think the numbers are out of any 200 genetic mutations, let's say a dragonfly, one of it, the wings are a little smaller, the legs are more purple, the antennae are a little shorter, a little longer. Out of any 200 genetic mutations, 195 of them are neither help the animal or hurt the animal's survival. They have no function. They don't do anything. And of those remaining 5, 3 of those changes hurt the survival of the animal, and 2 of them help the survival of the animal. That's generally the numbers as I've heard them. And it's random. And then we see through processes, whatever the earth, that creature's atmosphere is at the time, whether it's wet or dry, high elevation, low elevation, those changes are mechanistically selected for, meaning the people, the animals, the creatures that don't have, the genetic mutations that are beneficial are passed on because everyone else dies, right? So if there's a God, 99.9% of his creations have been failures. They went extinct, right? They were shoddy designs. They were discarded designs. So in one sense, of course, you could prop up a God and say God is behind evolution. God is behind the Big Bang. But the more we learn in science and the more evolution, especially, really, the whole point of it is that it's blind and mechanistic. You could, prop up and stick up a God. Well, there is God behind it. God created a universe in which evolution is a process, totally, but it just becomes less necessary. And according to Occam's razor, you want to have, you want to make as little assumptions as possible. So
yeah. So I want to stay with this because I think that this is a really important and just fascinating conversation to have. But to kind of steer it to children's books, part of why this is an interesting conversation, even for 2 adults to have, or, for society to have, is I have 2 kids. I have one who just turned 5 and one who's 2. And we send them to a Christian preschool. And then on Sundays, they go to a Sunday school. And this was something I went to church as a kid, but not really. I went just put in my hour. I wasn't really paying attention. I wasn't thinking about God or anything like that. But when we had kids, I was thinking, well, there's some really complicated questions out there. What happens when you die? Where did we come from? All that kind of stuff. The stuff that we don't really know the whole story. So how do I explain this to my kid? And it was a hard, it was a conversation that my wife and I had. She was raised more religiously than I was, but what I think about is I'm not a fan of ideologies as an adult. I don't like political ideologies. I don't like a lot of ideologies. I think it oversimplifies things. Right. But for children, their brains are just developing. I think that there's something beneficial to simplifying the world a little bit so they understand that there is a structure, there is something here, so they get some answers, because the reality of the unknown can be very scary and things like that. And I think that there is something very simplistic to, let's say, religion. So that's Adam and Eve, the Noah's Ark and stuff like that. Now you can get really complicated too. I loved C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity. I think that in that he presents, arguments that the most brilliant minds can argue about. I watched the debate between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, 2 ridiculously smart people having this kind of discussion. And I think it can get complex, but I think it can also be very simple. So that's why I am raising my kids at this age to believe these stories. So it gives them some structure. And then as their minds develop, then they can start asking questions. I don't run a dogmatic household. I try to have them ask questions and we'll dive into it. And again, I guess when just getting back to my question and our conversation, just on a grander scale, is I think of we say there's not a lot for God to do. I wonder, there's a great, I think it's an Einstein quote maybe, where it's something like, not everything that counts can be counted. And I wonder for things like like love. Okay. So love
Right.
is something that's very hard to prove. Free will, I mean, I've heard the arguments against free will and they're pretty good.
Yep.
So, but I guess I wonder, even if it's like a metaphorical truth to believe in free will, that Brett Weinstein concept, you can't really measure. You can't, if you say like prove that you love your kids, it's just something that you feel. It's very hard to quantify that in a scientific way. So I guess I'm just curious in your thoughts in that realm of like, how does that fit in? There's obviously an evolutionary benefit to love and those feelings for monogamy and stability and raising your offspring and things like that. But you undoubtedly love people in your life. It doesn't necessarily feel like it's science. That doesn't mean that it's not. It doesn't feel like it's just an evolutionary tool. It doesn't mean that it's not. But I just wonder if there's something there that's like a different. It's like a different game. There's the provable game, and there's a game that's like a non-measurable game that's kind of being played in the world, which makes the world kind of cool.
Right. Yeah. So you said a lot there. Just to unpack, I'm going to go back to what you said about raising kids with simple stories.
Yes.
I mean, I think, and I wonder if you'll agree, but I think Judaism and Christianity and science and evolution and almost everything could be told in a very complicated way or a very simple way. So, that's what my books, the Annabelle and Aiden children's book series, tries to do. It tries to break down evolution and the Big Bang and what happens when we die and these big questions for little thinkers. It tries to break that stuff down into simple stories that children could understand. So I don't think we need to resort to teaching fictional stories as fact because they're simple. Right. We could teach the truth and teach it in a simple way. We could have our cake and eat it too. We could do both. And it's, I think the stuff we know through science is beautiful and just as amazing and magical as any story as any alternative story we could have. So I think anything could be told in a simple.
That's why you wrote these books, right? Because like you said, that, I mean, there isn't. Yes, it's possible. You've proven that it's possible, but it's not common.
Right. No, it's not common at all. Yeah. I mean, there's only. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I did this. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And then Einstein saying not everything that counts could be counted. So, I mean, then we get to the, material reductionist debate, dualism versus monism and all of that. I personally believe that Albert Einstein was wrong there, that everything that counts actually could be counted. We might not be able to count it yet because we don't understand the science, but throughout all of human history, you mentioned love. I think Sam Harris and any neuroscientist could say that we pretty clearly do understand what happens in the brain when you feel love. It might sound less poetic and beautiful to us. It might usually be, presented in that way. But I do think everything is reducible to mechanistic operations.
Like measurable even? Like, I would love to get a neuroscientist on here. A couple that I know, I ask them. Because, I guess would that be measurable? Because you can't measure it in like, well, I bought my wife flowers, right? So could it be like the release of this amount of whatever serotonin or dopamine or whatever the chemicals are?
Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah. I mean, is that, and then do you measure that? But then what happens if you feel it, but then it doesn't release a lot? Like what is that? What does that mean? Then you don't love your wife or, I don't know how that would, and
that's impossible.
I don't know if we have the tools to do that. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that's impossible. All the feeling is a chemical or electrical signal, shooting across our brain. So we have this in neuroscientists. If you tap a certain part of the brain or damage a certain part of the brain, the person feels this or that, or even sees things, or even forgets how to recognize faces, or feels cold or feels hot. I mean, it's all there. Hundreds, not even so long ago, for thousands of years, human beings talked about illness like we talk about love or consciousness. They said, "Oh, it's not a physical thing. I don't feel well, but it has not. There's not. They didn't have germ theory. They didn't know what a virus was, so they thought you were being you were possessed by demons for thousands of years. We thought we were being possessed by demons, and now we have germ theory and we understand how that works. We thought that there was a rain god, and now we understand how clouds hold water, that evaporated into the cloud. And, it's all so far, every single answer we've ever had for any question ever has been a mechanistic answer, ever. So I don't see why consciousness would be any different. I don't see why love would be any different. And I also think it's important to understand that doesn't make it less important or less beautiful or less significant just because we understand how it works.
Yeah, it would all be in the method that it's presented, right? I mean, that's a big part of it, and that's getting back into the books and presenting these ideas to kids. I know that one of the themes that you have, I believe it's in the book about what happens when you die, is a lot about gratitude and about living a good life and those kinds of ideas that are so important, that are so, I talk about gratitude all the time. I love the quote. I think it's Neil Donald Walsh, I think is his name. It's like something like the struggle ends when gratitude begins. I love that. And I think that that's something that really people need, especially in 2019 America, is to understand how good things are. You read Steven Pinker's book or something like that. And, so like, because we don't know what happens when we die. So, without spoiling the children's book too much, like what essentially, what pathway do you take in explaining that to little kids?
Right. So our fourth children's book, it's called What Happens When We Die. I actually didn't want to call it that. I was afraid of using the word die because I thought it was negative and it would scare children. And a lot of parents and homeschoolers and educators told me that I wanted to call it What Happens When We Go. And people said that's going to be confusing for children. Own the word, own the D word, say it out. And people really wanted me to write that book. So I wrote it. I think it's still our most popular, even though it's not even our most recent. And I was inspired by really two clips on the internet. One is Neil deGrasse Tyson being interviewed by Larry King. And the other is Stephen Fry speaking on a British Humanist Association video. And they both said something about death. They said a few things that inspired me. Number one, our consciousness might end, unless someone believes in a soul and that it continues on to heaven or hell or an afterlife. But our brain dies, our body dies, but our body was always recycling itself. I don't have the same body I had a year ago. I have different skin cells, we're constantly recycling all of our bodies. We're all connected. And the first law of thermodynamics is that energy never dies. It's never created and it never dies. So our energy lives on forever. And, they talk about, Neil deGrasse Tyson says, if I was immortal, I wouldn't really get anything done. I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning. I wouldn't feel a sense of urgency to love and to accomplish and to live life, because I know that I always have tomorrow. And the thing that makes things beautiful is that they don't last forever. Stephen Fry gives the example of eating a piece of cake or watching a movie or reading a book. If it never ended, you'd get sick of it. You'd lose interest. It's just not enjoyable. There's nothing to cherish. There's nothing to hold on to. So mortality and death is something that gives life its shape. We have a life. We're here. We have a childhood. We have an adult life. We have to enjoy it, and we know it's going to end soon. If I knew right now that I'm going to live for another 15,000 years, all of the urgency in my career and my marriage and my human relationships, obviously I would want to be comfortable, but there wouldn't be a sense of cherishing the moments for what they are. So all of those things together, I thought was a beautiful and scientific-based way to write about death for children and to remind them that if a pet dies or a parent dies, they could look at trees, they could pick up a leaf and smell it and really know. And this is not metaphorical; it's literal.
Yeah.
That their loved one that died is still here, in a sense that their atoms, their energy is part of the universe that it's always been a part of. And we all have a piece. Scientists even say we all have an atom from William Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. We have a piece of Gandhi inside of us. We're all connected, and kind of a sense of being one and interconnectivity with the universe and being immortal, quote unquote, in that way. And that thus not being as scared of death, and also appreciating the only life that we know that we have and making the best of it.
Yeah, I just watched Lion King again with my kids. It's the circle of life. He's like, when we die, we become the grass, and then the antelope eat the grass. It's like, well, yeah, that's actually pretty spot on.
Yep.
So I know that your books have been controversial, and you had was it the evolution book that was banned from was it Catholic organization, or what was that happened?
Yes, the first book, it was called The Story of Life, about 3 years ago, came out on Darwinian evolution. And the Christian World News Network wrote an article accusing, they said that there was like a team of people that wrote the book, a group of aggressive atheists, quote unquote, were targeting children with Darwinian propaganda. That was the article. And I didn't know how to handle that. I was a little bit afraid. I wasn't used to any media attention, let alone negative media attention. So I was not happy about it until that week. I the next morning I woke up to an outpour of support, and the book really propelled the book to become a bestseller on Amazon, The Story of Life. And I appreciated the article, and I wrote a second book on critical thinking and mailed it to them with a letter telling them that they inspired me to write a second book and turn this into a book series that is the Annabelle and Eden book series today. And I was hoping they would ban that too, but they didn't take the bait.
JR, how old are you?
I'm 37.
Okay. Oh, me too. Because the reason I ask that is because I have connections to religious schools as well, and I see now just in education. I wonder if you were in high school in the late 90s, early 2000s, was it different, or is evolution still at religious schools? What I have seen is that it's not as taboo. I was surprised when I heard about you being banned and then banning this, and I read the article about it, and it said something like, this propaganda, this evolutionary propaganda. I was like, wait, I thought this was established that evolution is there's a lot of evidence to say that's a lot of evidence is a gross understatement to support evolution. The people that I know that teach at religious schools, they do what I kind of initially said, which is reconcile the truth that lies in religious text. There is some sort of truth in that like Brett Weinstein says, the metaphorical truth, that the truth, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, of if you follow this book, you may come out ahead in life in how to treat people and things along those lines. Reconciling that to the reality of what is provable. And that seems to be more of the way to do things in 2019. Am I off in that because I only know the people that I know in religious schools. So
right. Yeah. So it depends so are we talking about America? So you're saying in this
let's
day
stick
and
to
age,
America.
So it depends what country, it depends what religion, it depends what sect. Evangelicals I think Christian News Network, they were mentioning Ken Ham. I don't know. I think they're evangelical. I don't, I'm Jewish and I grew up in a Jewish household and a Jewish community, which I'm in a Jewish community now. I know less about Christianity. I don't know how much you know about it. I think, I know that the Pope said a few years ago that evolution is true. I think what you're saying is true in 60 to 70% of religious truth. There's so much to talk about. There's so many demographics. It completely depends, right? Islam is probably the most hostile to evolution. Judaism and Christianity went through enlightenment and modernity that Islam has yet to go through because it's a quote unquote newer religion, and it's in a way a victim of its own early self-confidence. Christianity in general is more hostile towards science than Judaism is. That is something I know.
Yes. I just want to comment on that real quick. There's something and this is something that you know better than I do, but I am close with people in the Orthodox Jewish community. And there's something in that they, in just whether it's just like Torah reading or in the community, whatever it is, sitting around the table and you can't Google things on Friday night, is the willingness to dive into ideas and critically think. And like it is embraced to think critically and to argue and to debate. And that is something that seems to be unique to in religious communities, unique to Judaism that I've found.
Yeah. You still there? Could you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So now I'm going to speak about the Jewish Orthodox community. So it sounds like to me from where you teach and who you know and where you live and based on things, what you're saying within the Orthodox Jewish community, there is a middle-sized minority of people. So the more modern and less religious they are, they accept evolution. I would say, wow, this is a really hard number, but I would say in America, 30% of Orthodox Jews would say evolution is completely true. And 40% would say it's completely nonsense. And the middle, wow, I'm really bad at math. The middle 30% would say it's true, but one species can't become another species. They would give some apologetics. They would shrug it off. They would say it's kind of true in every way except for the one way that it offends my religious sensibilities. The color of a moth's wings could change and the length of a bird's beak could change, but one species could never become another species. They make this arbitrary distinction between macroevolution and microevolution and, kind of bend themselves into a pretzel inventing certain things that evolution is all true except for the one way in which I feel like it would violate stuff that I was,
Right.
So there's a mix and there's a spectrum.
Okay.
But yeah, if you, quote unquote Orthodox Jews, if you have 100 of them, 70% of them won't be able to say, it's totally completely true. And human beings came from earlier primates that were other species. And by the way, that's my own anecdotal.
Right.
I mean, it's worth something because I lived this life and I've lived all over and gone to all different kinds of religious schools and, but that's what it seems to me.
Yeah. I guess I'm just, to get this back about, teaching kids, I guess what is the benefit of ignoring truth? Okay. As adults. So as we're the ones raising kids and deciding how we raise our kids, and for educators listening and for, myself and you're, writing books for kids. So you're an educator too, in that respect. So what do we benefit from being willfully ignorant? And that's probably my biggest pet peeve with people is people who are willfully ignorant. And if you could learn something, you could know something, you could expose your blind spots in your thinking. Why would you not do that? And I understand there are psychological reasons and that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of a rhetorical question. But when you are trying to set your child up for success, do you believe that exposing them to the most truthful information possible is that, where does that lie on your hierarchy? So my kids are 2 and 5. This year I got maybe 1 or 2 more years while they believe in Santa Claus. And it's pretty awesome. It really is. I go out behind our house and I shake these bells and I say like, oh, I'm taking out the garbage. And I shake the bells and they get so excited. It's a really cool thing to see. And I, because I'm so analytical, I'm like, well, lying to my kids. It's like, yeah, I am, but I justify it somehow. And like, and I guess if you kind of get, that's not really a coherent question. I apologize. But do you kind of get where I'm getting at is like, I think you would agree, obviously, that we want to teach our kids truth, but is there something also that is good to teach kids that is a little bit of fantasy? Like, where does fantasy kind of come in and where does that draw the line? Like, are my kids going to be like, you lied to me, Dad, you said there was a Santa and there isn't? It's like, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's a good question and we have to know where to toe the line. But I think as much as we could, I think often that dichotomy is a false dichotomy. I think there's just as much magic and inspiration and beauty in teaching reality as there is in teaching the opposite. So I don't think someone has to choose. Now, when we talk about traditions, of course, it's a fun thing, to do Santa Claus or Jewish or any religion. Some things are fun. The question is, when your kid is 20 years old and he says, Dad, is Santa Claus real? Are you going to say no? Or are you going to say, well, some people think yes, some people think no. But I mean, you say like, oh, I'm lying to my kids. You're not lying to your kids. You're not telling them Santa Claus is real in a real way. If your kid, you're engaging in a game with them and they understand it's a game. And if they don't understand it's a game, that they'll understand it's a game eventually in their life. But if your kid came to you teary-eyed and he really, really, really wanted to know, and you looked him in the eye and you said, Santa Claus is real, and I know it, and I'm telling you that it's real, and this was like a real serious conversation, that would be lying to your kids. Unless unless it might be justified in the most specific case where the kid really needs to hear that. That's a different story. But when you're playing a game and engaging in ritual with children, that's a beautiful thing at the right age appropriate. So I'm not against that, and I get it. But you're right.
I'm actually dreading that. I'm dreading him asking me like the real questions. I'm talking about my older one now because it's like, oh man, no, because I'm excited. It's really cool to see at this age.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity. And Neil deGrasse Tyson says something great about this, it's a great opportunity. His kids put their tooth under the pillow and they did this science experiment. He kind of said, they said, is the tooth fairy real? The best answer you could give any kid is, let's find out, So the kids kind of did a science experiment. They would spring a trap to see if the parent would come in, or they would put the tooth under the pillow and not tell their parents about it to see if it turned into money. So there is no better opportunity to teach critical thinking than the moment your kid asks, is the tooth fairy real? Is Santa Claus real? Is God real? Are angels real? Is Judaism real? Is anything real? The best answer you could have as a parent is, some people believe yes, some people believe no, but let's find out and try to engage them in critical thinking exercises and ways that you could determine, some answer. And even if they change, even if it's the wrong answer, it doesn't matter because they're going to change their mind 10 times in the next month anyway. But just engaging in those exercises and having those conversations, I think, are great opportunities for critical thinking lessons.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Learning about the world is really fun. Ideologies and dogmas, it's boring. It's boring. And I got to this. I mean, my freaking podcast is about this because I went through these moments in my life, and it came late. It came in my late 30s with issues that went down with my family and just marrying into a culture that was very different than the one I grew up in, that I just had these like the end of like an M. Night Shyamalan movie where it's like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, where it's like, oh my God, everything I thought was not what I think it is. Like, it's really exciting to understand that like we don't know much about the world and we can discover stuff all the time. Like being certain of the way things are it's just like, come on, like, no, we're not sure. Let's keep figuring this out. Let's keep getting better. Let's just keep our willingness to learn and our willingness to be open-minded. I'm reading a book right now. I guess it's pretty controversial. It's Douglas Murray's book, Madness of Crowds. I just started it, and I'm trying to get other teachers, because it addresses like social justice issues, which have really become like the focal point of almost all of education. And and I really want to engage in conversation about this book with other teachers, and a lot of teachers don't want to engage with it. And it's very frustrating for me because I don't want to own anybody. I don't want to prove anyone wrong. I just want to have a conversation. I want to learn. And I want to know where I'm wrong, because I don't want to be like so certain myself. It's really frustrating to see that, because especially for educators, we're supposed to be lifelong learners. We're supposed to be curious, staying curious. Why are you not curious about this issue? I think a focal point of the book, I'm early in it, but is we pretend to know about a lot of things that we don't know about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm right there with you. I love what you just said, and we could be good friends.
Yeah. All right.
I know. I completely agree. Your frustrations I have often. So,
yeah.
But go on. Yes.
No, just because we're coming up on an hour. You said a couple of times that like science is beautiful, and the truth of what we can prove, is no less as like amazing and incredible and things like that. Do you think that your book series and what you're doing, it's not common? You are pretty unique, JR. And I wonder, do you think that this is like a left brain, right brain thing? That, science-minded people, they might be more left-brained, and they might be, the more like systematic type of people. And then the more fantasy kind of creative types would be, the more right brain. And then those are the people that would traditionally write children's books. Do you think is that a reason why when you say, how Neil deGrasse Tyson is great at this too, but when you say like how beautiful and incredible and amazing and all of like those things that are in the traditional children's books and fantasy stories and stuff like that stuff is real and it's right in front of us and it's right around us. But is there a disconnect because of that element? And I'm not a brain expert, but I just wonder do you feel like that might be a reason why you see this the way you do and many people don't?
Perhaps. I wonder. That's a great question. I think it's important to show people. I think you're right that science has traditionally been presented as a set of cold, hard facts. And that's why the work of science communicators like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Cara Santa Maria, Richard Dawkins, and who wrote a children's book, and I think just came out with another book for young people. I think that's why our job is so important, to show people that it is not facts. It's a story. It could be told as a story. It is our story.
Yeah.
My fifth book is called Sapiens, Our Human Evolution, Our Human Story. It tells our story, how India crashed into Asia, made these mounds that blocked rain so that Australopithecus afarensis in Africa had no more trees to climb, so they had to learn how to walk upright. So,
is this like the Yuval Harari book?
So my book has the same main title with a different subtitle, but my book is a bit highly influenced by his book and Guns, Germs, and Steel and a lot of other books and a few of Chip Walter's books, who's also a great author. But no, just telling our story. Science is a story. It's history. Science is the study of what happened in the past, you know? So I think it's important to appeal to people's left and right brains.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. There has been a big, science communicators have a job to do to show people that that's not the case. It's not cold hard facts. It's stories that connect us all past religious lines and ethnic lines and nationalistic boundaries that we love to dwell on and emphasize. We're all the same. We all came from the same stardust. We all descended from the same ancestors. There's so much more that unites us than divides us. And we're all made from stardust. And this isn't a poem. This isn't metaphorically true. This is actually literally true. And it changes the way we create medicine and food and agriculture. I mean, it's win, 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 win.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I'm ranting now, but I do feel passionate about this because it's literally, it just so happens to be true. It just so happens to be incredibly useful. It just so happens to be incredibly beautiful, and it unites us all. I mean, it's just, I'm frustrated that I'm the only one or one of the few people doing this. And I think Carl Sagan was the first one to really, really tell science in this way. And that's why he's a hero of mine and a hero of many science communicators today.
Well, that's really awesome to hear because, I read the book. I read Sapiens, Guns, Germs, and Steel. And then I'm like halfway through Nick Christakis' book, Blueprint. And these are dense texts and they're really complicated and they're really hard. And like, you have to be a certain kind of person to go through them. And to break that down in a more simple kind of children's format, I didn't understand this stuff. And part of my job, because I'm teaching it to high school kids who really don't care about school. So like I have to break it down in a very simple way. That's kind of my thing. That's what I do well, is I take complicated issues and I break them down for teenagers who really don't give a shit. So, sorry, language, but that's essentially what my job is. So I think that if there's more out there that can break this down in a simple way and just explain, like there's a lot of nuance, obviously, but there is with religion too. Like there's so much nuance. People dedicate their, months to studying one line in the Bible.
Right.
So you can do that. So why can't we do that with science? And it's not done very often. And I think that I think it's a really cool kind of a pathway that you're on. And I think that it's something that we should embrace, and we should embrace like understanding these things about the world, because getting more information about the world, this is something I heard Neil deGrasse Tyson say on Joe Rogan recently. He said, if you are religious, understanding, and you believe that, then understanding the world that your God created deeper in a more profound way will bring you closer to your God. And that's a really cool that's a cool way to kind of promote it to the people who might be resistant. And because I think that's what we have to do. We have to connect to the people that are resistant toward it. So I talk to my students who are like Republicans. I'm saying, the way that people view Republicans as being greedy and heartless and stuff like that. Here, read Arthur Brooks. Like read the Conservative Heart or Love Your Enemies or something like that. Like you have to connect. You have to bring in people that are gonna, judge what you're doing and bring them in to say, like, actually what I'm doing aligns with what you also believe in, like your core foundations about what you believe in, about how to treat people or whatever it might be. Like I'm not, discounting that at all. I'm still promoting good things. I'm still promoting, all of that stuff. This isn't challenging you. We're not enemies here. We're on the same side. I think the more we can do that, the better.
Amen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I agree.
So, JR, where can people find you? So I know that it's the AnnabelleandAiden.com, right?
Yeah, spelled in the most common way. ANNABELLE, Annabelle, and Aiden, AIDEN. So AnnabelleandAiden.com.
Is it and is it ampersand or is it AND?
Good question. A-N-D.
Okay.
Yeah. So AnnabelleandAiden.com. When they go to our website, they will see, I think the timing of this podcast, the listeners should be able to see a window pop up. That'll take them to our Kickstarter. This is big news. We're actually in the middle of our Kickstarter campaign right now when you're listening to this, that you could pre-order a copy of our upcoming sixth title called This World Was Made for Me. It's about life's evolution through the 5 mass extinctions. It touches on climate change and the 6th mass extinction we're in today. And people could get their name in the book and even put a picture of their kid's face inside of the book as one of the characters, which people really love. So, yeah, go to our website, and that window will pop up and take you to a Kickstarter page. And we have a Facebook page people could find also if they look on Facebook for Annabelle and Aiden.
Cool. All right, JR. Thank you so much for doing this. I enjoyed this conversation.
I really enjoyed this conversation. Cool. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, man. All right. Take care. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been Cylinder Radio. The success of this podcast and the educational revolution that I hope you will be a part of is dependent on those who find value in it. Please take a few moments to review us on iTunes so the show is more easily found. If there was a perspective on today's topic that was not highlighted in this episode, or you have an idea for an episode topic that you want to understand more deeply, please email us at cylinderradio@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram @WillRusch, WILLREUSCH. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the next one.